You know, there's never been a better time to be a smartphone shopper with a budget, and that's mostly because Motorola has just released this, the Moto G, the 2015 version. Despite really strong competition from Asus and Huawei and companies like Alcatel, the Moto G remains probably the best bargain Android smartphone you could find. So first, let's talk about what's inside the phone. It's powered by one of Qualcomm's Snapdragon 410 chips. Now that's a quad-core processor clocked at 1.4 gigahertz, and it comes with 2 gigabytes of RAM, or at least this version does. The base level Moto G, which you'll be able to get for $180 straight from Motorola, comes with 8 gigabytes of internal memory and only 1 gigabyte of RAM, so it's going to be a little bit pokier. That said, using this slightly more expensive version, I really have nothing to complain about. It's actually a little astonishing how good, how smooth this thing feels, especially considering how much you're actually paying for it. Now, all the horsepower in the world doesn't mean a whole lot if you don't have a half-decent screen to play stuff on, and that's why we've got a 5-inch 720p display here. That might not be too thrilling to you because, as you might know, Motorola's 2014 Moto G also had a 5-inch 720p display, but I really don't have any complaints about this either. Colors are bright and nicely saturated, if a little on the muted side, so if you're like me and you prefer the nice punchy colors of an AMOLED screen, you're gonna want to look elsewhere, but for 180 bucks, this is really not bad. It's actually pretty good for games too, so if you're sitting down for a few rounds of zombie slaying in Dead Trigger 2, you're gonna find that things actually look really crisp and detailed. I cranked up the graphical quality of the game, expecting the worst, and really didn't come out too bad. A little bit of stuttering during cutscenes, but actual gameplay wasn't impacted all that much, so not bad there. Part of that speed is also defined by the software, and Motorola always has taken a light touch with Android. That hasn't changed. We've got what Motorola calls a pure Android experience here. Just to be clear, that doesn't mean Motorola hasn't done anything. This isn't pure stock Android. There are quite a few under the hood improvements, plus a few bits and pieces that Motorola added to sort of make the Moto G a little smarter for your benefit. So instead of having the notification LED, you'll actually have notifications appear as icons right on the screen. Now that's a trick Motorola has taken from its previous flagships, the Moto X, and transplanted here for the first time into the Moto G. Also new to the mix is what Motorola calls Motorola Assist. It's a bit of a contextual intelligence that Motorola has popped into the Moto G, and what it does is it takes into account when you sleep, where you are, and acts on that appropriately. So if you're in a meeting, or if you're in church, or if it's 11 p.m., the phone knows, okay, I should probably shut up now. It does take a few moments to set it up the first time just to get your rules the way you like them, but it's generally a pretty painless process, and it's honestly a bit better than having to mash your volume button down when your phone goes off in the middle of church. Now, if you've read our review of the Moto G last year, you'll remember the camera was fine, it's okay, but we're actually working with a much more powerful sensor this time around, and that's because Motorola has basically taken the camera out of its 6-inch Nexus 6 and transplanted it right here into our $180 Moto G. That means we're looking at honestly very, very nice photos in broad daylight, really nicely saturated, very well detailed, stuff that you generally not want to print out, but more than good enough for Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Things get a little dicier though when photons get sparse. The Nexus 6 wasn't great at low light photography. This is not either. After a while, once it gets dark, your photos will come out probably pretty muddy and blurry. There's an HDR mode that actually does work pretty nicely if you've got the patience to hold yourself really, really still, but aside from that, it's pretty rough sailing on the camera front. Okay, now we're left with one final big question, and that's how long this battery is going to last. If you're anything like me, you'll be texting on and off and sending messages in Slack. I've been able to get a Moto G through that daily grind for about 13 or 14 hours before I have to plug it back in, and that's pretty consistent use. We ran it through our standard Engadget rundown test where the phone loops a 720p video at 50% brightness connected to Wi-Fi until it dies, and it's stuck around for about 10 hours and 40 minutes, so pretty good compared to a lot of flagships out there, and definitely better than the 8 or so hours we got out of last year's Moto G. Now, make no mistake, the Moto G is not a perfect phone, but it's about as good a phone as you're going to get for $180. You can tell where Motorola has made its compromises. The screen could be a little better, the camera could have better low light performance, but other than that, Motorola has done a fantastic job of making sure that this phone doesn't make you feel like you're missing out on anything. And that's, well, that's definitely worth the asking price.